Hello, viewers of Crime Documentary Files. Today we continue our series with three of the most puzzling and unbelievable cases. The first case took place in Shanxi Province, China. Around 9 a.m. on December 16, 2005, the Dingbian Town Police Department received a sudden phone call reporting a crime. The call came from a middle-aged woman named Liu Gaohong. According to her, 2 days earlier, when she returned home in the morning, she discovered that several valuable items were missing, and her niece had disappeared as well. Liu Gaohong hoped the police would investigate the case. About 15 minutes later, Dingbian police arrived at the scene. After questioning Liu Gaohong, they learned that the missing items included a Casio film camera, 2 platinum rings valued at 950 yuan and 700 yuan, along with about $100 in cash. Although the stolen money and belongings weren't significant, after their initial inspection, the police noticed some oddities at the scene. Typically, in break-ins, there are signs of forced entry and ransacking. However, in Liu Gaohong's home, every room appeared tidy. All items were neatly arranged, and there were no signs of an intruder. As for the missing person, it was Liu Gaohong's distant niece, Qiao Li. According to Liu Gaohong, her niece had just started working at a telecommunications company in Dingbian City, Shanxi Province, 3 months ago. Since Qiao Li had not yet found temporary housing, she had been staying at Liu Gaohong's home. On the morning of December 14th, when Liu Gaohong left for a business trip, Qiao Li was still at home. However, when she returned from the trip, Qiao Li had suddenly vanished. Based on Liu Gaohong's recollection, around 7 p.m. on the same day of her business trip, she received a call from her mother back home. Her mother mentioned that Qiao Li had suddenly called her. Although the call connected, no one spoke on Qiao Li's end. Liu Gaohong's mother assumed it was a poor signal and tried calling back, but she could no longer reach Qiao Li's cell phone. Concerned, she called Liu Gaohong to check in. Liu Gaohong also tried contacting Qiao Li, but was unable to reach her niece. Liu Gaohong found the situation a bit strange, but since she was on a business trip at the time, she didn't pay much attention to it. It wasn't until 2 days later, when she returned home from her trip, that she realized what had happened. Based on this, investigators speculated, could Qiao Li have taken her aunt's belongings and fled? From the evidence gathered at the scene, it seemed likely that the perpetrator could have been someone familiar with the family. Therefore, the Dingbian police decided to start investigating leads related to Qiao Li. The investigators agreed that once they found Qiao Li, the theft could likely be solved easily. However, what they didn't expect was that the truth behind the entire case would be far beyond what any of the police officers imagined. That afternoon, after Liu Gaohong reported the case, Dingbian police went to Qiao Li's usual workplace to investigate. At the telecommunications company, a supervisor of Qiao Li named Zhu Fumin recalled that on the morning of December 14th, Qiao Li had come to work as usual, and around 5:30 p.m. that day, she had left for home, just like any other day. However, the next morning, Qiao Li didn't show up for work. Zhu Fumin called her, but her phone was off. Qiao Li's unexplained absence made her colleagues at the company feel something was off. Still, based on their statements, Qiao Li showed no signs of unusual behavior on her last day at work. Dingbian police also learned that although Qiao Li had been working at the telecommunications company for less than 3 months, she was receiving her salary on time. Qiao Li's fixed monthly salary was around $270, and given that she was unmarried and had no children, her financial situation seemed quite stable. So, why would she steal from her own aunt? As investigators were grappling with this question, Liu Gaohong, the one who reported the case, called the police again. She reported that while cleaning up the house, she had discovered some strange clues. The Dingbian police immediately returned to the scene for a second investigation. In the corner of the living room, there was a large wooden cabinet over 6 feet tall. According to Liu Gaohong, there had initially been 2 black suitcases on top of this cabinet. While packing up, Liu Gaohong suddenly noticed that one of the large suitcases was missing. This led investigators to consider whether Qiao Li might have stolen both her aunt's belongings and the suitcase at the same time. To verify this possibility, the Dingbian police proceeded to search Qiao Li's bedroom. There, they discovered a wooden cabinet about 3 feet tall next to the bedroom door. On top of the cabinet were 2 items. One was a set of keys that Qiao Li typically used. According to Liu Gaohong, this set of keys included the keys to both the front door and Qiao Li's bedroom. The other item was a black handbag. Upon investigation, police found that the contents of the handbag were neatly arranged, with no signs of tampering. Additionally, investigators found Qiao Li's bank savings book under the pillow in her bedroom, showing a balance of over $700. These unexpected discoveries led Dingbian police to reconsider their initial assumptions, which no longer seemed to make sense. If Qiao Li had stolen the camera and silver rings from Liu Gaohong, why didn't she take her own personal belongings as well? If Qiao Li wasn't the thief, then who was? Based on the keys and the handbag found in Qiao Li's bedroom, the Dingbian police deduced 2 key facts. First, on the evening of December 14th, after finishing work at the telecommunications company, Qiao Li had returned to Liu Gaohong's home. Second, her disappearance after that night did not appear to be a premeditated action. If she had left her aunt's house, it's possible Qiao Li encountered an unexpected situation, which forced her to leave in a hurry. To aid in the investigation, police quickly contacted Qiao Li's parents. According to her father, Qiao Jidong, the last conversation he had with his daughter was around 5:30 p.m. on December 14th. During that phone call, Qiao Li spoke with him normally, showing no signs of distress or anything unusual. The police then retrieved the call history from Qiao Li's mobile phone. The results showed that after she left work that day, Qiao Li's phone made a total of 3 calls. The first call was to her father at around 5:45 p.m. on December 14th, lasting 13 minutes. The second call was to Liu Gaohong's mobile phone at around 6:23 p.m., but the call didn't connect. The third call was to Liu Gaohong's mother at around 6:51 p.m. This call was particularly strange, as it only lasted 9 seconds. The police later spoke with Liu Gaohong's mother to gather more information. She explained that she didn't hear Qiao Li's voice during the call. Instead, she heard the sound of car horns, suggesting that Qiao Li was outside on a busy street. After this brief call, Qiao Li's mobile phone could no longer be reached. At this point, investigators began to suspect something was wrong, suspecting that Qiao Li may have been kidnapped. Meanwhile, that same afternoon, the investigation team stationed at Liu Gaohong's house made some crucial discoveries. In one of the bathrooms, police found 2 small bloodstains. One was on the bathroom floor, lodged between the tiles. Additionally, they found some traces of blood on the edge of a box located under the toilet. The second bloodstain was on a tile behind the bathroom door and was larger than the first. The investigators collected DNA from both bloodstains and compared it with DNA from Qiao Li's parents. The analysis confirmed that both bloodstains found in Liu Gaohong's bathroom belonged to Qiao Li, who had been missing for several days. Combining all the findings, the police hypothesized that Qiao Li did not leave the house voluntarily, but rather she may have been kidnapped and trafficked elsewhere. Based on this theory, the police quickly assembled a special investigation team and began to dive deeper into the social connections between Qiao Li and Liu Gaohong. Meanwhile, the investigation team continued to expand their search of the crime scene. After confirming that Qiao Li was missing, the police questioned the neighbors living next to Liu Gaohong's house. All of them reported that on the day of the incident, they didn't hear any unusual noises. The scene of the crime was located in a small, relatively secluded residential area with surrounding walls. All of these walls were over 6 feet high, making it difficult for a person to enter or exit the neighborhood by climbing over them. Therefore, the police speculated that the person who broke in and kidnapped Qiao Li likely entered through the front door of Liu Gaohong's house. Unfortunately, the area around the front entrance was not equipped with surveillance cameras, so the police were unable to use footage to track people entering and exiting the neighborhood. However, at 11 p.m. each night, the main gate of the residential area is locked, and after that, anyone entering or leaving the neighborhood must go to the guard post and knock on the door to be let in. As a result, the police quickly located the night guard who was on duty the night of the incident for questioning. The guard stated that in the early hours of the day of the crime, between 2 and 3 a.m., a man knocked on the door from outside. According to the guard's memory, the man had an accent from a different region and was about 5 feet 7 inches tall. At the time, the man was wearing dark-colored clothing and it was late at night, so the guard couldn't clearly see his face. However, based on the man's voice, the guard estimated him to be between 20 and 30 years old. Although the man claimed to be a resident of the neighborhood, the guard recalled that he had never seen a young man with that kind of accent before. With this information, the investigators considered the possibility that this young man's late-night departure from the neighborhood seemed suspicious. However, during the time frame before and after the man left the neighborhood, the guard did not see Qiao Li entering or exiting the area. This surprised the investigators. Could it be that Qiao Li had left the neighborhood before 11 p.m. that night? At this point, the police decided to conduct a more thorough investigation into the identity of the man. Meanwhile, the on-site team discovered another strange detail in Liu Gaohong's home. According to Liu Gaohong, a knife from the kitchen drawer had suddenly gone missing. The police later found the knife in the dining room near the kitchen. However, the location where the knife was hidden was very secretive. In Liu Gaohong's home, there was a white cabinet mounted on the wall, and the missing knife was hidden on top of this cabinet. Liu Gaohong recalled that she and her niece rarely cooked, so the knife was usually kept in the kitchen drawer. The fact that it was found on top of the cabinet in the dining room struck her as very strange. Even more surprising, there were no fingerprints on the knife. The police speculated that if someone had used the knife for ordinary purposes, there would likely be fingerprints. This led them to suspect that the perpetrator had handled the knife. The police sent the knife to the lab for further testing. At the same time, to identify the suspicious man who entered and exited the residential area on the night of the incident, the police began investigating Qiao Li's social connections. According to her colleagues at the telecommunications company, Qiao Li's social circle at work was not complicated. She was known for being introverted and mild-mannered. As a result, she didn't interact much with her coworkers. Qiao Li's family also mentioned that, despite having been working for over 2 years, her lifestyle remained quite simple. Typically, the people Qiao Li communicated with most frequently were her parents and her fiancé, who lived far away. According to Qiao Li's father, her fiancé's name was Wu Lijun, a 26-year-old from Qiao City, Shanxi Province. After graduating from a vocational school, despite working in different cities, Qiao Li and Wu Lijun had still decided to get married. Mr. Qiao Jidong told the police that on February 8, 2005, based on the lunar calendar, Qiao Li and Wu Lijun had held a simple engagement ceremony in their hometown in Mechi County, and they had planned to have their wedding by the end of 2005. Everything seemed happy and promising. However, during the investigation into Qiao Li's social circle, Dingbian police made Wu Lijun a primary subject of their inquiry. There were 3 reasons for this. First, Wu Lijun was from Baoqi, Shanxi Province, near the city of Xi'an. People from Baoqi speak with an accent similar to that of Xi'an, which is quite different from the local Yulin dialect. Therefore, to someone from Dingbian, Wu Lijun's accent could be considered non-local. Second, Wu Lijun's age and height closely matched the description given by the security guard at the residential area. Third, as Qiao Li's fiancé, Wu Lijun could easily have entered Liu Gaohong's home under the pretense of their existing relationship on the day of the incident. Considering these suspicions, the investigation team decided to send 2 officers to Baoqi to look into Wu Lijun. Based on Wu Lijun's testimony, from December 14th to about half a month prior, he had been working regularly in Baoqi City. His colleagues confirmed this, clearing him of suspicion. Meanwhile, the investigation team continued to expand their search, looking into Qiao Li's family, friends, colleagues, and former classmates. However, after interviewing nearly 100 people, the police still found no evidence connecting any of them to the suspicious man. 5 days had passed since the incident, and Qiao Li's family grew increasingly worried. As a result, Her father and uncle organized relatives and friends to search for Qiao Li themselves. At this point, the police also began investigating Liu Gaohong's social connections. According to her testimony, after divorcing her husband 2 years earlier, she had been living alone in a second-floor apartment with 3 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. Although divorced, her children were in the custody of her ex-husband, so Liu Gaohong led a colorful and free life. While talking, she suddenly remembered someone who had visited her home. Although this person wasn't a close acquaintance, Liu Gaohong recalled that it was quite possible they could have been involved in the theft. At this point, Liu Gaohong shared a rather strange romantic story with the investigators. According to her, after her divorce, she began online dating using the QQ software on her computer. She quickly got to know about 10 men, some of whom she had good conversations with and agreed to meet in person. Over half a year ago, Liu Gaohong successfully began dating a young man among them named Fang Jia, a 28-year-old from Gansu province. However, due to his job, he had been living in Yinchuan, Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region for quite some time. Feeling lonely, Liu Gaohong had traveled to Yinchuan 3 times to visit Fang Jia. In addition to Fang Jia, she also met several other young men, including a young man nicknamed Xiao Dongbei, a neighbor of Fang Jia, who left a strong impression on her. This was because the night before Qiao Li disappeared, Xiao Dongbei had visited her home. At that time, Liu Gaohong and Qiao Li were sitting at home watching TV when they suddenly heard a knock at the door. To Liu Gaohong's surprise, it was Xiao Dongbei. He told Liu Gaohong that he had originally come to Dingbian to meet an online friend, but had lost his wallet, so he wanted to borrow 20 yuan from her to take a ride back to Yinchuan. Without thinking much, Liu Gaohong quickly lent him the 20 yuan. However, Xiao Dongbei didn't leave right away. He pulled Liu Gaohong into the bedroom and closed the door. After about half an hour, Qiao Li, sitting in the living room, began to feel uneasy, so she found an excuse to call Liu Gaohong back to the living room. Seeing this, Xiao Dongbei quickly left Liu Gaohong's house. After hearing Liu Gaohong's story, the investigators considered Xiao Dongbei's sudden appearance highly suspicious. Moreover, based on Liu Gaohong's description of his local accent, age, and height, these characteristics closely matched the guard's description. Xiao Dongbei now became the primary suspect. Consequently, the investigation team immediately sent 3 officers to Yinchuan to conduct further investigation. Based on the clues provided by Liu Gaohong, the police quickly located the rental house where Xiao Dongbei had been living. However, his neighbor, Fang Jia, informed them that Xiao Dongbei had moved out a few days earlier, and no one knew where he had gone. The investigators continued questioning Fang Jia for more information about Xiao Dongbei. Since everyone in the area was renting, neither Fang Jia nor the other neighbors knew where Xiao Dongbei was from or where he worked. They only recognized that he had a regional accent from Dongbei, which is why they called him Xiao Dongbei. As for his real name, no one in the neighborhood knew. However, Fang Jia provided the police with a useful lead. He mentioned that Xiao Dongbei had once brought a girlfriend to his rental home. According to Xiao Dongbei, his girlfriend's name was Zhao Fengping, and she was from the Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region. Notably, Zhao Fengping had visited Xiao Dongbei several times, and based on her appearance and attire, it seemed like she worked in the entertainment industry. Although Fang Jia didn't have much information, the Dingbian police had to rely on these limited clues to trace any possible leads on this individual. With the cooperation of the Yinchuan City Police, the investigation team launched a 5-day search at various entertainment establishments. However, they found no trace of either Zhao Fengping or Xiao Dongbei. The police then traveled to Zhao Fengping's hometown, where they located her parents. According to her parents, their daughter had left the village 2 years ago and hadn't returned since. She had called them last year during the Lunar New Year saying, "I'm working in the Yinchuan area, don't worry about me." However, Zhao Fengping's parents told the police that they had no idea where their daughter was now. The investigators left a contact number with her parents and then returned to their station. With the case stalled for an extended period, the police issued a reward notice, seeking any concrete information about Xiao Dongbei or Qiao Li. Unfortunately, more than 6 months passed without any new leads. Initially, Qiao Li's parents were hopeful that the police would solve the case quickly. Whenever a homicide occurred in Shanxi province involving a female victim, Qiao Li's father and uncle would travel to the area, trying to gather as much information as possible. However, after more than a year, Qiao Li's family had found no news about her. Meanwhile, as the Dingbian police investigation failed to make any significant breakthroughs, they gradually shifted their focus to other cases. This left Qiao Li's family feeling disheartened. Then, 3 years after the case, the Dingbian police unexpectedly received a phone call from an unknown number. The caller was none other than Zhao Fengping's father, the girlfriend of Xiao Dongbei. He informed the police that his daughter had returned home, and if they wanted to question her, they could come right away. This good news greatly excited the entire investigation team. During the interview, however, Zhao Fengping initially appeared uncooperative and did not want to reveal her ex-boyfriend's real name to the police. After several rounds of patient persuasion, she finally disclosed some personal information about Xiao Dongbei. According to her, his real name was Quan Wei, and he was 30 years old. Although his official residence was registered in Luoyang, Henan province, Quan Wei listed his birthplace as Heilongjiang on his household registration, which aligned with his Dongbei accent. Next, the police questioned Zhao Fengping further about her relationship with Quan Wei during the time they lived together. Unexpectedly, Zhao Fengping accidentally revealed a shocking secret about Quan Wei. She explained that in early 2003, she was working in Luoyang, Henan province. At that time, a girl named Dan rented an apartment in the same building as her. It was through Dan's introduction that Zhao Fengping met Quan Wei. Shortly after, Zhao Fengping and Quan Wei began living together. At first, the three of them lived happily, but then something strange happened. Zhao Fengping said that in May 2003, she went on a business trip to another city in Henan province. After 6 days, she returned to her rental apartment in Luoyang and discovered that her friend Dan was dead under the bed. At that time, her boyfriend Quan Wei had also disappeared without a trace. Because Zhao Fengping was a very timid person, she was terrified and quickly left Luoyang. 3 days later, she returned to the apartment to collect some personal belongings and, out of curiosity, wanted to check on Dan. To her surprise, when she entered Dan's room, she found that Dan's body had vanished without a trace. Zhao Fengping admitted that she had suspected Quan Wei might have been involved in the incident, but out of fear, she never contacted him again. To avoid suspicion, Zhao Fengping moved back to her hometown in Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region. About a month later, Quan Wei came to see her. Out of fear, Zhao Fengping agreed to continue their relationship, but they did not live together as they had before. Zhao Fengping said that although she and Quan Wei continued dating fairly regularly, by December 2005 they had a heated argument over work. After that, Quan Wei suddenly disappeared without a trace. Zhao Fengping thought he had left Yinchuan, but a week later, he suddenly reappeared in her apartment. Quan Wei told Zhao Fengping, "If anyone comes asking about me, don't reveal any information. I need to go back to Henan for a startup project, and once I'm successful, I'll come back to take you with me." At that time, Zhao Fengping believed him. She continued working at an amusement park and waited for Quan Wei's return. Initially, Zhao Fengping could still contact Quan Wei by phone, but about 6 months later, she found that his phone number was suddenly unreachable. Zhao Fengping told the police that she went to Luoyang, Henan province, to look for Quan Wei, but he seemed to have vanished completely. No one there knew his whereabouts. After verifying this information, the investigators were almost certain that Quan Wei's sudden disappearance in December 2005 was likely connected to Qiao Li's case. With the assistance of Henan police, Quan Wei's whereabouts were quickly determined. In 2006, when Dingbian police arrived in Luoyang, they found that Quan Wei had been sentenced to 8 years in prison for rape and was still incarcerated. At this point, one of the officers noticed an issue with Quan Wei's sentencing record. The record showed that Quan Wei had been arrested by Henan police on August 2nd, 2005. And later, in October 2005, the Luoyang City People's Court officially sentenced him to 8 years in prison, with his sentence starting on August 2, 2005, and ending on August 2015, 2013. Meanwhile, in Shanxi, the exact date Qiao Li went missing was the night of December 14, 2005. This meant that at the time of Qiao Li's disappearance, Quan Wei had already been in Henan police custody for over 4 months. This made it impossible for him to have traveled to Shanxi to commit the crime. So could Xiao Dongbei, who had previously been involved with Zhao Fengping, actually be Quan Wei, who was now in prison? Or was Zhao Fengping lying to the police? To verify these suspicions, the police brought a photo of Quan Wei for Zhao Fengping to identify. Zhao Fengping confirmed that the man in the photo was indeed Xiao Dongbei, her former boyfriend. The Dingbian police then showed the same photo to Liu Gaohong and her boyfriend Fang Jia, and both also confirmed that the man was Xiao Dongbei. The investigation team was completely baffled, as the lead they had been hoping for didn't provide the breakthrough they expected. With the investigation at a standstill, the Dingbian police decided to send more investigators to Henan province. They hoped that by visiting Quan Wei's hometown, they might find additional clues. There, a neighbor provided a critical piece of information. He had worked alongside Quan Wei's parents at a factory. The couple had twin sons. The older one was named Quan Wei, and the younger one was Quan Chao. Although the family appeared happy, both sons caused trouble as they grew up, and their parents had no choice but to sell their home and move back to their old residence in Heilongjiang province. Based on this neighbor's information, the Dingbian police quickly tracked down Quan Chao, Quan Wei's twin brother. They compared the household registration photos of the two brothers, and although their hairstyles were different, their faces and facial features were remarkably similar. Moreover, according to the neighbor's description, Quan Wei and his younger brother Quan Chao were not only similar in appearance, but also in height and weight. As a result, it was difficult for outsiders to tell them apart in a short time. However, their parents and some close relatives had a specific way to distinguish them. The neighbor explained that Quan Chao, the younger brother, was missing 2 joints on his left pinky finger, while Quan Wei's left pinky was completely intact. Armed with this crucial information, the Dingbian police went to the prison in Henan province. They secretly obtained Quan Wei's fingerprints through local judicial authorities, and the results showed that the inmate named Quan Wei, who was currently serving time in prison, had no corresponding fingerprints on his left pinky finger. This meant that the person incarcerated in Henan province was not Quan Wei, but his twin brother Quan Chao. This situation left the investigators perplexed. Why would Quan Chao serve time in prison on behalf of his brother? The investigation team soon discovered that back in 1995, Quan Chao had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for theft and was released in November 2000. However, in August 2005, after reoffending by committing rape, he was arrested by the Henan police. According to the relevant laws, if a person reoffends within 5 years of being released, it is considered a repeat offense and is subject to harsher punishment. The investigating officers speculated that Quan Chao might have assumed his brother Quan Wei's identity to avoid a more severe penalty. This suspicion was later confirmed by Quan Chao himself during his confession. However, despite searching throughout Luoyang, the police found no leads on Quan Wei. Considering that Quan Wei's parents had returned to their hometown, the police decided to investigate further in Heilongjiang province. As a result of their interviews with Quan Wei's parents, the investigation team quickly tracked down Quan Wei. The twist this time was that he had been living under his younger brother Quan Chao's identity. The reason for this switch was that on March 21, 2007, Quan Wei was arrested by the Heilongjiang police for theft. At that time, Quan Wei assumed his brother's identity to stand trial. Ultimately, Quan Wei was sentenced to 10 years in prison by the People's Court for theft under his brother's name. After more than 3 years of investigation, the police finally found the primary suspect in the case. However, they couldn't act hastily, as they lacked any concrete evidence connecting Quan Wei directly to the crime scene. The police then reviewed all the case materials, hoping to find any direct evidence that Quan Wei had left behind at the crime scene. Unfortunately, in the investigations conducted 3 years earlier, no fingerprints or hair samples from any suspect were found. The only thing they could confirm was that a kitchen knife had been moved from its original location at the crime scene. However, the knife had been thoroughly cleaned, leaving no trace of forensic evidence on the blade or handle. On September 28, 2011, the Dingbian police brought in a highly experienced retired investigator, Gao Li. The investigation team then made a second trip to the Heilongjiang province prison. This time, they conducted an interrogation with the suspect, Quan Wei. However, Quan Wei resisted strongly and refused to provide any information. After the interrogation, the team immediately collected Quan Wei's fingerprints and a blood sample. At that moment, he appeared visibly frightened. Upon reviewing the case again, the blood stain on the corner of the wall behind the bathroom door caught the attention of the investigation team. Based on his extensive criminal investigation experience, Gao Li quickly formed a hypothesis. He suggested that the small, scattered bloodstain pattern could be the result of contact between a mop and the tiles on the wall. After testing this theory, it was confirmed to be accurate. This indicated that in the bathroom at the crime scene, the perpetrator had used a dark red mop to clean up the traces of the crime. Although the mop had been thoroughly cleaned, Gao Li deduced that there had initially been a substantial amount of blood present in the bathroom during the crime. Additionally, the knife found at the scene had several curved dents. The police believed that the main reason for this was that the blade wasn't strong enough, and when it struck something harder, such as bone, it bent. Based on this assumption and the missing suitcase, the police theorized that Qiao Li, who had been missing for years, might have been dismembered and placed in the suitcase before being removed from the neighborhood by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, the crime had taken place more than 6 years prior, and the house had changed owners multiple times. As a result, the investigators missed the opportunity to search for other evidence at the crime scene. Despite multiple analyses, Gao Li remained focused on the knife with the curved dents. He and his colleagues believed that the knife had been stored for many years and that the blade's surface had been cleaned by the perpetrator. However, the handle and the guard between the handle and the blade had not yet been forensically examined. For this reason, in December 2011, the investigation team decided to send the knife to the Forensic Testing Center in Shanxi Province for a more detailed examination. The results revealed that between the handle and the guard of the knife, technicians found 2 small skin tissue samples lodged in the crevice. Finally, through DNA comparison, the Forensic Testing Center concluded that the 2 skin cell samples recovered from the knife matched Quan Wei's DNA with 99.9% certainty. This meant that the knife found at the crime scene had been used by the suspect, Quan Wei, as the murder weapon. Based on this evidence, the police quickly brought Quan Wei back to Shanxi for further investigation. That same evening, the investigation team conducted an interrogation late into the night. However, Quan Wei refused to admit that he was the man known by the nickname Xiao Dongbei. He continued to claim that he was Quan Chao, and when the police asked about his family situation, Quan Wei stubbornly refused to answer. The investigators presented the direct evidence found on the knife. After more than 2 hours of pressure, Quan Wei's defensive stance finally broke. He confessed that he was not Quan Chao, but indeed Quan Wei. He then admitted in detail to the murder of Qiao Li. Rewinding to December 11, 2005, Quan Wei, who was in Yinchuan City, had a fight with his girlfriend, Zhao Fengping. He then returned to his rental room and made plans to meet an online friend. The next day, Quan Wei had arranged to meet this online friend at an internet cafe in Dingbian County. Before leaving, he remembered his neighbor's girlfriend, Liu Gaohong, who also lived in Dingbian County. Quan Wei asked Fang Jia for the exact address of Liu Gaohong's house. On December 13, 2005, Quan Wei traveled to Dingbian by bus to meet his online friend. However, he unexpectedly had his wallet and phone stolen. With no other option, Quan Wei decided to go to Liu Gaohong's house to borrow money. That evening, Liu Gaohong lent Quan Wei 20 yuan. but Quan Wei lured Liu Gaohong into the bedroom. About half an hour later, their intimate conversation was suddenly interrupted by Qiao Li. Quan Wei then left Liu Gaohong's house, but an evil intention began to form in his mind. The next evening, Quan Wei returned to Liu Gaohong's house, intending to borrow more money. However, Qiao Li told Quan Wei that his girlfriend wasn't home. Quan Wei didn't leave, instead saying, "I'll wait for Liu Gaohong in the living room." He then forcefully barged into Liu Gaohong's home. At that point, Qiao Li attempted to call Liu Gaohong, but the call didn't go through. Qiao Li then began to mutter some vulgar remarks to herself. In a fit of rage, Quan Wei strangled Qiao Li to death. The police asked him, "Why did you lose control like that?" "What did Qiao Li say to you?" Quan Wei responded, "I don't remember exactly, but she basically said I was scamming Liu Gaohong out of money." According to Quan Wei's confession, after killing Qiao Li, he panicked and quickly came up with a plan to dispose of the body by putting it in garbage bags. Around 7 p.m. that evening, Quan Wei took Qiao Li's mobile phone to a street outside the residential area, intending to call Liu Gaohong to make her believe Qiao Li was still alive. However, he accidentally called Liu Gaohong's mother, and after a few seconds, he hung up and switched off Qiao Li's phone for good. Next, Quan Wei went to a nearby convenience store and bought some trash bags. He then returned to Liu Gaohong's house, moved Qiao Li's body into the bathroom, and took a knife from the kitchen drawer. He dismembered the body and retrieved a black suitcase from on top of the cabinet in the living room. By around 2 a.m., he had finished cleaning and sanitizing the entire crime scene. Before leaving, Quan Wei entered Liu Gaohong's bedroom and stole a camera and 2 rings. After leaving the scene, Quan Wei threw Qiao Li's clothes into a roadside trash bin. He then hailed a taxi and went to a remote suburban area where he knew of an old, unused well. He disposed of Qiao Li's body in the well, and the black suitcase was discarded in a pile of trash near a canal. To gather evidence, the police took Quan Wei to that suburban area to identify the disposal site. 6 years had passed since the crime, and the area where Qiao Li's body had been dumped had since been developed into a coal plant. After a lengthy search, the Dingbian police finally located the well in a small corner of the coal plant. When they recovered the body, the investigation team also found a black hairpin. Liu Gaohong later confirmed that the hairpin had belonged to Qiao Li. After 6 years of challenging investigations, the case of the home invasion murder was finally solved. On the morning of June 27, 2013, the Intermediate People's Court of Shanxi Province held the trial of Quan Wei. When the prosecutor recounted the details of how Qiao Li was killed, Qiao Li's father couldn't hold back his tears. On the defendant's bench, Quan Wei kept his head down and repeatedly expressed remorse toward the victim's family. Although Quan Wei pleaded for a chance to rehabilitate himself, after more than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The defendant, Quan Wei, was sentenced to death for robbery and premeditated murder. He was also stripped of his political rights for life and had all his personal assets confiscated. Additionally, Quan Wei was ordered to pay a total of 10,000 yuan in economic compensation to the plaintiffs Mr. Qiao Jidong and Liu Gaohong. On January 22, 2015, the death sentence was carried out. With that, the nearly 10-year-long case was finally brought to a close. This was undoubtedly a very long story with many unexpected twists and numerous individuals involved. I hope I have told it to you as clearly as possible. Our next case takes place in Guangxi Province, China, formerly known as the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Near the First People's Hospital of Yulin City, Guangxi, there are numerous makeshift buildings. Though these buildings appear run down and the living conditions are poor, many people still reside there due to their proximity to the hospital. However, on March 22, 2020, in a building less than 650 feet from the hospital, a nurse living on the second floor discovered that her drain was suddenly clogged. She called her boyfriend, who worked at the local police station, for help, and together, they contacted the landlord. Upon inspection, they pulled a large amount of ground meat from the drain pipe. This puzzled everyone. Who would throw so much meat down the drain? It didn't make any sense. The people living in this area were struggling financially, and it seemed odd that someone would waste so much meat. What was even more disturbing was that the meat didn't look ordinary. The landlord immediately called the police. When the police arrived, they pulled out 2,368 pieces of ground meat from the pipe. Even more horrifying, after testing, it was confirmed to be human tissue. Later, the police found an electric cooker and a black plastic bag containing bones in an apartment on the 3rd floor. A gruesome and terrifying crime was unfolding, leaving everyone in shock. So, who was the victim? And who rented the apartment on the 3rd floor? These were just a few of the many questions police were asking. Soon after, following a swift investigation, the tenant was arrested on her way home from work. To their surprise, the suspect was an innocent-looking, fragile nurse named Li Fengping. No one could believe that this woman could be behind such a horrific act. Was there more to this story? Let's take a closer look at the background of this nurse. Fengping was born in 1995 in Bobai County, Guangxi, China. She came from an extremely impoverished and challenging family background. Fengping was the eldest of 4 siblings. Her father worked odd jobs for a meager income, which wasn't enough to cover the medical expenses of her mother, who was too ill with uterine fibroids to work. Given the family's difficult circumstances, many parents would have chosen to pull their children out of school early to help support the household. However, Fengping's father was different. He understood that his lack of education had limited his opportunities for a decent job. Because of this, he made sure that none of his 4 children were allowed to drop out of school. Life for Fengping was also incredibly challenging. In addition to her schoolwork, she had to take care of her sick mother, cook, and look after her younger siblings. Despite all these hardships, she maintained excellent academic performance. When she entered college, she received a scholarship covering tuition costs of 6,000 yuan each semester. Fengping became a source of pride for her entire family. Fengping graduated from Guangxi Medical University in 2017. At that time, 3 hospitals offered her a position, one in Nanning, one in Liuzhou, and the other at the First People's Hospital in Yulin. Fengping discussed with her father which hospital to choose. Working in Nanning offered the best career prospects, and Liuzhou had the highest salary. However, she ultimately chose Yulin for one simple reason. It was close to home. A 2-hour taxi ride meant it would be convenient for her to visit and care for her ill mother. While this was her plan, reality turned out quite different from what Fengping had imagined. Aside from holidays, she rarely had time to visit home. She rented an apartment about 325 square feet in size, located in an alley behind the hospital's main gate. Though the building was old, the rent was affordable, at only 350 yuan per month. After officially starting work at the hospital, Fengping had to go through China's medical training rotation system. This required young medical staff to undergo rotational training in various departments for about 3 years before being permanently assigned to a specific unit. This meant that Fengping had to rotate through all the hospital departments before receiving a permanent position. Every time she moved to a new department, she had to start over from the most basic nursing tasks and gradually work her way up. But with dozens of departments in the hospital, every transfer required her to pay fees similar to bribes. It was an exhausting process. As a new employee, her salary in each department ranged from about 2,000 to 3,000 yuan, and after a while, it could increase to 7,000 to 8,000 yuan. But each time she was transferred, Fengping had to start from the beginning again. Fast forward to June 2018. At that time, Fengping was transferred from the neonatal unit to the spine surgery and orthopedics department. One night, while working the night shift, she was chatting with a colleague who introduced her to a disguised lottery game, which in reality was a form of gambling. When Fengping first learned about this game, she thought it would be fun, and even better, could help her make some extra money. However, she had no idea that this was the start of a downward spiral for the young nurse. The game didn't require registration on a mobile phone or any personal identification. You could choose how much to bet and how often, with no restrictions. The game was entirely based on luck. Strangely, players would always win during the first few rounds, but those early wins didn't result in profit. To make any real money, you had to keep winning multiple rounds to cover the amount you had already bet. It was a trap that most players didn't recognize. Feng Ping quickly became addicted to the game, unable to break free, and money became meaningless to her. Over time, her bets grew larger and larger. She could lose tens of thousands of yuan in a single round, but even when she won, she'd only break even. Her biggest winning day netted her 100,000 yuan. However, in this type of online gambling, there are no ultimate winners. Within a year, Feng Ping had transferred a total of 2.9 million yuan across 2 bank accounts to the platform. That amount was a staggering sum for a nurse who had only been working for 1 year. As a result, Feng Ping came up with the idea of borrowing to invest, borrowing money to gamble, and hoping to earn enough to repay her debts. With this mindset, she began borrowing money from her co-workers, claiming it was for her mother's cervical cancer treatment. Feng Ping was known for being smart, outgoing, and hardworking, so she had built a positive image at the hospital. Typically, she would borrow a few thousand yuan at a time and sometimes pay it back after receiving her salary. At this point, her co-workers' wallets had become a revolving door of debt for her. Initially, the borrowed money allowed her to cover some losses, but it was never enough to fill the growing financial hole she was in. By July 2019, Feng Ping took things a step further. She exploited a loan program from the Bank of China, which offered healthcare workers in Yulin City a credit limit of up to 300,000 yuan. She asked her co-workers to take out loans in their names to help her. Most of the older nurses declined her request outright, but a few younger nurses, who had closer relationships with Feng Ping, agreed to help her secure a loan of 300,000 yuan. As Feng Ping sank deeper into gambling, she never asked her family for help. Although she appeared somewhat fragile, Feng Ping had a rather bold personality. This was evident in an incident that occurred one day at work. While she was drawing blood from a patient, someone else kept knocking on the door. Irritated, Feng Ping snapped, "Why are you knocking?" Fortunately, with the intervention of the head nurse, she was able to successfully apologize to the person involved. Despite years of training at the hospital, Feng Ping continued to face her challenges alone, as her family was too poor to offer any support. In addition to borrowing money from her co-workers, she had a record of taking out numerous online loans. Within just 6 months, Feng Ping used every available loan platform, all through her own credit cards, and most of these platforms were predatory lenders with high interest rates. Because of this, her life and thoughts were constantly tormented. Even though there were times she would win hundreds of thousands of yuan in a single day, she still found life meaningless, unable to satisfy the deep thirst within her. Despite the large sums from her loans, Feng Ping spent almost nothing on herself. She continued living in the same 350 yuan apartment. Even when she wanted to buy a refrigerator, she hesitated for a long time before deciding to spend a few hundred yuan on one from Taobao. As time went on, her situation deteriorated further, and eventually, the turning point that led to her crime arrived. In October 2019, out of sheer desperation, Feng Ping reached out to Dr. Liu Gaohong, the deputy head of the spinal surgery department, on WeChat, asking if he could lend her 200,000 yuan. Now, about Liu Gaohong, he was 51 years old, and people often remarked on his wealth. He was known to drive a BMW SUV. Shortly after Feng Ping contacted him, to her surprise, Liu Gaohong agreed, but naturally, there was a condition. The two arranged to meet at an upscale hotel near the hospital. According to Feng Ping, this was a day filled with humiliation, one that would forever change her life. That day, when Feng Ping entered the room, she saw Liu Gaohong standing there, not dressed as usual. She immediately felt disgusted by his behavior. Feng Ping wanted to leave, but he didn't allow her to go and forced her into having relations with him. The next day, Feng Ping received the money, but it wasn't the 200,000 yuan she had asked for. It was only 50,000 yuan. To make matters worse, she even had to sign an IOU for the money she borrowed from Liu Gaohong. What confuses me is that Feng Ping always expressed disgust toward the arrangement. Yet, she continued to meet with Liu Gaohong under the same conditions. From October 2019 to February 2020, they met at a hotel a total of 13 times. After each encounter, Luo Ping, the deputy head of the department, would transfer money to Feng Ping. It wasn't until March 2020 that the full 200,000 yuan he had promised her was finally paid. Even though she received the entire amount, Feng Ping was left feeling full of resentment. Clearly, Feng Ping wasn't entirely innocent, but Dr. Luo Ping took advantage of her desperate situation for his own satisfaction. On top of that, Luo Ping repeatedly threatened her, saying that if she didn't comply, he would expose her and make sure she couldn't stay at the hospital. He told her, "I have connections with the police department and the prosecutor's office. If you report this, you'll be arrested immediately." At this point, Feng Ping's situation became increasingly dire. For a young woman who had left her hometown to work and was now drowning in debt, this job was essential. Additionally, she feared the stigma her family would place on her. In her desperation, all she could think about was ending it all. Feng Ping soon fell into depression. According to her medical records, she had been prescribed a total of 100 sleeping pills, as she was suffering from insomnia and could only sleep for 3 to 4 hours a night. Over the course of a month, she took 80 sleeping pills, but fortunately, nothing happened, as she would often vomit afterward. The second time, she left the gas valve open in a sealed room overnight, but that attempt also failed. The third time, she took 2 vials of insulin from the hospital and injected herself with 800 units, but Feng Ping still couldn't end her life. By March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic had started to surge in China. Due to restrictions, they couldn't book hotel rooms anymore. Luo Ping asked Feng Ping to rent another place near the hospital, and he would cover the rent. So, she rented a nearby apartment. On the night of March 20th, as usual, Luo Ping came to the rental place in a drunken state. As soon as he walked in, he undressed and demanded Feng Ping to serve him. However, Feng Ping was in the middle of playing a game and didn't want to bother with him. Luo Ping then mentioned that he hadn't eaten yet. Feng Ping refused him, saying she hadn't showered. Luo Ping became furious, hurling insults and threatening to get her fired. After a while of ranting, he eventually fell asleep, snoring loudly. Sitting at the edge of the bed, Feng Ping grew more and more furious, thinking about the humiliation and disgust he caused her. In her anger, Feng Ping picked up her phone and searched online with the keyword, "What to do if you truly hate someone?" Among the many search results, she stumbled upon a terrifying suggestion. "Make him disappear forever." That idea suddenly took over her mind, and she couldn't stop thinking about how to make it happen. She started wondering how the weak could overpower the strong, and eventually, she decided to strangle him with a computer cord. At around 1 a.m., Feng Ping picked up a computer cable, wrapped it around Luo Ping's neck, and pulled hard. He woke up struggling, and they wrestled on the bed, with Luo Ping grabbing tightly at the cord. A few minutes later, Luo Ping became motionless. Feng Ping was either unusually strong or her pent-up anger gave her extra strength at that moment. Afterward, she touched his carotid artery but felt no pulse. Strangely enough, she instinctively began to perform CPR on him, but he remained still with no signs of life. At that point, Feng Ping accepted that he was dead. Perhaps killing him had only been a spontaneous reaction, one she couldn't control, but now it was too late. Quickly regaining her composure, Feng Ping used Luo Ping's fingerprint to unlock his phone and transferred 98,000 yuan to her own card. But in an instant, the money was automatically deducted by an online lending platform, leaving her with just 900 yen. At this point, Feng Ping tried different methods, such as taking half-body photos, using Luo Ping's bank cards, and his ID to apply for loans. However, since all the procedures required verification from a person who was conscious, she couldn't get any money. During the early morning hours before dawn, Feng Ping also searched on his phone for information on how to destroy evidence perfectly, erase stolen card traces, alter health insurance, car registration, and other details. Even more horrifying was that by 8 a.m. on March 21st, Feng Ping didn't flee. Instead, she calmly dressed up and went to work at the hospital like nothing had happened. She only began destroying the evidence after returning home at 6 p.m. Later, Feng Ping told her lawyer that she did this because she wanted to prevent bacteria from growing, so she had to handle it quickly. It took her more than 20 hours, from 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. the next day, to dismember Luo Ping into over 2,000 pieces. Given her profession as a nurse, this wasn't difficult for her. Some of the larger pieces were even boiled down before being flushed down the toilet. The bones were placed into 2 large black bags. The scene inside that room was horrifying. During this time, Feng Ping returned to her original rental place to grab some clothes, discarded her dirty white shoes, and went to Luo Ping's car to find the IOU. However, she didn't find it. It turned out that Luo Ping had left the papers in his office locker, and they were later discovered by a nurse in the spine and orthopedic surgery department. To avoid suspicion, Feng Ping even impersonated Luo Ping and sent a text message to his wife to buy some time. His wife had asked why he hadn't been home for days. The text message replied, "I'm out of town for surgery and can't come home. Last night I was drunk, so I couldn't answer the phone." By the evening of the 22nd, Luo Ping's wife had a bad feeling. Why wasn't he answering her calls? She immediately called the hospital to inquire, and the staff on duty replied, "Doctor, Luo Ping hasn't had any surgeries these past few days." As a result, Luo Ping's wife called the police and filed a report, identifying him as the victim. When Feng Ping was arrested, she didn't deny the crime. In fact, she displayed a very calm demeanor. After the first trial, Feng Ping was sentenced to death for intentional murder and theft. Upon hearing the verdict, Feng Ping's father fainted. After regaining consciousness, he filed an appeal. He couldn't comprehend how his daughter's life had been completely destroyed in just a few short years. On December 22, 2020, the Guangxi High People's Court held the second trial. Throughout this horrific case, Feng Ping mostly described her crimes in a rather calm tone. Many experts believe that this demeanor stems partly from her profession. As a nurse, Feng Ping was likely very familiar with illness and accidents, making her somewhat desensitized to such scenes. According to the prosecutors, she had an inappropriate extramarital affair with the victim. Feng Ping, on the other hand, insisted that she had been coerced and threatened into having an illicit relationship with him. She reacted sharply, stating, "How could I possibly like him? Just seeing him made me feel sick. He was a fat man over 50, and he wasn't even worthy to be my father." However, the chat history between the two on their cell phones had been deleted and could not be recovered. Thus, the court could not determine whether Feng Ping had been threatened or not, but she had voluntarily gone to hotels with Luo Ping multiple times. Furthermore, on the day of the incident, she allowed the victim into the rented house after 10 p.m. This testimony was deemed inconsistent, and her claim that she was forced into the relationship was unconvincing. The court concluded that Li Feng Ping had a dispute with the victim over debt issues, which led to an argument, followed by her killing the victim and attempting to dispose of the body. The nature of the crime was extremely brutal, leaving a harmful impact on society. Therefore, she had to be punished severely according to the law. On August 20th, 2022, the Guangxi High Court delivered a public ruling, upholding the verdict from the first trial and rejecting the appeal. This time, her father accepted the reality that he would lose his daughter forever. It was indeed a heartbreaking conclusion for her family and those who cared for her. The next case we're covering took place on a stormy night in the town of Anlu, Xiaogan City, Hubei Province, China. On the evening of August 23, 2014, a sudden heavy downpour flooded the streets and alleys of Anlu. For the residents of the town on a night like this, there was nothing better than enjoying a good night's sleep. However, Li Chunping, a 41-year-old woman, was sitting at home anxiously, unable to sleep, because her husband, Fan Dawen, hadn't come home yet. Even worse, his phone had been off for a long time. This had never happened before, which only heightened Li's concern. Initially, she and her family members planned to go out and search for him, but the rain outside showed no signs of stopping that night, so Li could only sit and wait for the morning to come. The next day, Li called upon her relatives and friends to help in the search. They all wandered around, searching everywhere for the missing man. But strangely, after searching all day, they still had no news or clues about Dawen's whereabouts. At this point, Li realized that something terrible might have happened to her husband. So, she decided to report his disappearance to the Anlu town police. News of the police investigation quickly spread throughout the town, as Dawen was the owner of a factory there. He had assets worth tens of millions of dollars and numerous connections. This made the case draw significant attention from the community. There were various rumors about the reasons behind Dawen's disappearance. Some people suggested that Dawen had been kidnapped because of his wealth, which could bring the kidnappers a large ransom. Others speculated that Dawen had made enemies during his business dealings and was being hunted down. Still, others said that Dawen had an affair and was murdered. Faced with growing public interest, the Anlu police had to act quickly. The first thing they needed to do was determine the exact time and location of Dawen's disappearance. Based on Li's testimony, Dawen had left home in the family car on the afternoon of August 23rd. But around 11:55 p.m. that same day, his daughter saw her father's car parked under the building. This suggested that Dawen may have returned home in his car that night. However, no one knew the exact time he returned. Using the specific characteristics of Dawen's car, the Anlu police collected surveillance footage from roads he might have traveled on to investigate and verify further. As a result, the police discovered that at 11:35 p.m. that same night, Dawen's car was captured by a surveillance camera near an intersection. Based on this, the Anlu police established that the time frame of Dawen's disappearance was likely between 11:35 p.m. and 11:55 p.m. on August 23rd. So, what happened during this short window of time? The police decided to begin investigating the routes Dawen took while driving home, hoping to find some clues. However, due to the heavy rain that night and the late hour, many stores along the route had already closed. The police questioned people in the area, but no relevant information was collected. The only useful lead came from a neighbor who lived near Dawen's home. His name was Chun Muxiu, a repair and car wash service provider. Chun Muxiu's shop was located right under the building where Dawen lived. According to Chun Muxiu's testimony, on the night of August 23rd, he suddenly heard painful cries coming from the nearby hallway. Following the sound, he believed it was from a grown man. However, due to the heavy rain that night, Chun Muxiu could only hear it faintly. Shortly afterward, the agonizing cries stopped. Based on this clue, the police went to the entrance of the hallway under Dawen's building to conduct a detailed investigation. As expected, the investigators found a total of 7 bloodstains at the hallway entrance. 6 small bloodstains were scattered randomly on the ground near the entrance, and there was also 1 large bloodstain on the wall. Additionally, the investigators collected several human hairs in the northeast corner of the wall. The blood and hair were then sent to the police department for DNA analysis. The results showed that the 7 bloodstains at the hallway entrance, as well as the hair, all belonged to Dawen, the man who had been missing for the past 36 hours. Therefore, the police speculated that Dawen's last known location before disappearing was likely at this hallway entrance. Based on the small and scattered bloodstains, the Anlu police made an initial profile of the suspect. First, they concluded that on the night of August 23rd, Fan Dawen only suffered minor external injuries. It was possible that he had been kidnapped by an unknown individual, but the wounds were not severe and were not life-threatening. Considering the victim, Dawen, a healthy adult male, it seems surprising that the perpetrator could easily carry out the kidnapping. Therefore, it's likely that the suspect was also a large, physically strong man. Additionally, the perpetrator may have been armed or had accomplices. Secondly, the choice of the hallway entrance as the crime scene indicates that the perpetrator knew Dawen's home address, suggesting that the criminal could have been someone within his network of relationships. Third, after abducting Dawen, the perpetrator left the scene undetected. This suggests that they likely used a vehicle that night, and they were familiar with the traffic patterns in Anlu. Since the case involved a person's life, the Anlu City Police quickly formed a special investigation team and deployed 3 groups of officers to conduct a comprehensive investigation. The first group was tasked with monitoring Dawen's house, waiting for a ransom call from the kidnappers. The second group investigated Dawen's social connections and those of his family. The third group focused on the building where Dawen's family lived, conducting interviews and collecting statements within a 3-mile radius, hoping to find witnesses before and after the crime. Initially, everyone thought this was a well-organized kidnapping for financial gain. However, what surprised the police was that 48 hours after the incident, no one had called to demand a ransom. Meanwhile, the police received an even stranger piece of information from another witness, a middle-aged man named Liang Jun. He told the police that on the night of August 23rd, around 11:30 p.m., he was standing in front of a hotel to take shelter from the rain. He saw 3 people standing at the entrance of a stairwell across the street, moving back and forth. According to Liang Jun's memory, one of the men appeared to have drunk too much and was lying on the ground. 2 women helped him stand up and quickly left the stairwell. Since this time frame matched the period of Dawen's disappearance, the police speculated that the drunken man Liang Jun saw could have been Dawen, the missing man. However, that night, it seems Dawen wasn't lying on the ground due to intoxication, but because of a sudden attack. The police asked Liang Jun if he could recall the appearance of the 2 women, but Liang Jun replied that the heavy rain and dim streetlights made it hard for him to see clearly. However, he distinctly remembered that one of the women was wearing a white dress, while the other appeared to be wearing a light gray coat, and she had fairly long hair. When they heard this information, the investigators still found it very strange. In their previous theories, the police had never considered the possibility that Dawen could have been kidnapped by 2 women. If what the witness Liang Jun said was true, then who were these 2 women? Why were they at Dawen's home late at night, and why was he seemingly unguarded? At this point, the police on the investigation team began to believe that this was likely a crime committed by someone Dawen knew, and perhaps his wife, Li, might be withholding some clues. While waiting for a ransom call from the kidnappers, the second group of officers began interrogating Dawen's family. Based on his wife Li's testimony, although her husband was a well-known businessman in Anlu, they had both adhered to the principle of harmony in their more than 20 years of doing business. According to Li's recollection, her husband had never had a heated argument or conflict with anyone, and there were no financial disputes or debts in his business dealings. The police encouraged Li to think back and try to remember if anyone they knew frequently wore a white dress or a coat. However, after thinking carefully, Li responded, "I don't have any impression of that. Over the past 2 years, my husband has mostly focused on his business outside of the home, and I don't know much about the female friends he has met." Although the initial interrogation did not yield any useful clues from Li's testimony, her unusual behavior following the incident made the investigators slightly suspicious. From the moment the case was reported, Li had consistently maintained that her husband was not kidnapped but murdered. She even told the police that she had a bad feeling that her husband's body had been thrown into a river near Anlu called the Fu River. Based on this intuition, Li had asked some of her relatives and family friends to search the Fu River. However, faced with this unsubstantiated claim, the investigation team did not pay much attention to it. They suspected that Li might be hiding some unspeakable secrets. By August 27, 2014, 4 days after the case began, the police still had not received any ransom demands from the kidnappers. Then, around 4 p.m. that day, bad news arrived from the police station. It turned out that at around 9 a.m. that morning, a body had been found floating near the Fu River. According to the witness, Su Xiao, on the morning of August 27th, he went to the banks of the Fu River, as he usually did, to fish. It was a peaceful and quiet time for fishing. However, while fishing, he suddenly noticed a large object floating from the middle of the river without initially realizing what it was. At first, Su Xiao thought it was just a discarded mannequin used for selling clothes. But when the object drifted about 10 feet from the shore, Su Xiao suddenly realized it was a real human body. After 5 minutes of shock and fear, Su Xiao finally regained his composure. He immediately called the police. Once the body was retrieved, the Anlu police found that the entire body had become swollen. The victim was a middle-aged man wearing a white Jingba brand shirt while his pants had been removed and tightly tied around his legs. Additionally, weights were tied to the victim's ankles and wrists, and each was secured with steel wires. It was clear this was a murder, and the perpetrator had disposed of the body in the river to eliminate evidence and cover up the crime. During the investigation, the police found a blood test report in the victim's pants pocket. Unfortunately, the paper had been soaked in river water, and the writing was smeared and illegible. The body was then taken back to the police station for a more thorough examination. After analyzing and comparing the DNA, the forensic team finally confirmed the identity of the victim as Dawen, who had been missing for the past 4 days. Upon hearing the news of Dawen's death, his wife, Li, felt as though her world had collapsed. Although she had a premonition of her husband's fate, facing the painful reality, Li said she couldn't convince herself to accept such a cruel truth. The news of Dawen's murder quickly spread throughout Anlu. A wealthy local businessman had been kidnapped right under his apartment building and then brutally murdered. Such a heinous act sparked outrage and fear within the community. People became afraid to leave their homes and walk the streets, as the area no longer felt as safe as it once did. This mounting public pressure put the police under increasing stress. Considering the specific characteristics of the victim, the investigators developed 2 possible theories regarding Dawen's unusual death. The first theory was that the crime was motivated by a personal or romantic conflict. The second was that the crime stemmed from a business dispute. Since witnesses had seen 2 suspicious women around the time of the crime, the Anlu police leaned toward the first theory, that the murder resulted from a personal conflict. As a result, the investigative team decided to question Dawen's wife, Li, once again. However, Li insisted that her husband could not have been involved in an affair, as their romantic life had been well maintained. Some of Dawen's friends also told the police that he wasn't the type to engage in infidelity. After a series of investigations and interviews, the police concluded that in the minds of his family and friends, Dawen was simply a hard-working businessman with a respectable private life. Therefore, the likelihood that he was murdered over a romantic dispute seemed low. But how could they explain the presence of 2 women at the crime scene? Could it be that Dawen's enemies had hired assassins to kill him from the shadows? The investigation team decided to conduct a thorough inquiry into Dawen's rise to wealth to uncover possible answers. Their findings revealed some surprising leads. Going back 17 years to 1997, in Chupeng Village, Leigong Town, Anlu, Dawen, at age 34, had begun managing a road construction project in the town. Due to his diligence and excellent work ethic, he successfully completed these projects and built up a solid network and valuable experience. Starting in 2003, a wave of self-initiated home construction began among villagers in Anlu. Seeing an opportunity, Dawen decided to open a cement business with his wife. Leveraging his established connections and prior experience, the couple rapidly grew their cement business. In less than 5 years, they became the largest cement suppliers in the city, and their wealth quickly surged to the hundreds of millions in Chinese yuan. To expand his business further, in early 2012, Dawen took over a clay manufacturing plant in Anlu. This plant primarily supplied materials to tile production companies in the area. To avoid price competition, Dawen collaborated with 6 other clay plants in town and agreed to set a standardized price for clay materials in early 2014. Initially, this agreement benefited everyone in the clay industry, but it displeased the largest local tile manufacturer. As a result, the tile company, named Lianqiang, hired some local gangsters to monitor other tile plants in Anlu. Whenever they discovered a plant purchasing clay from Dawen, these enforcers would threaten and prevent them from doing so. Due to this, Dawen had a conflict with Lianqiang Tile Company. However, these disputes were relatively minor, and after mediation by local authorities, the tension between Dawen and Liancheng Tile Company gradually eased. The police decided to question some employees of Liancheng Tile Company. Among them, the key figure was a 32-year-old man named He Fei. The police asked He Fei about his whereabouts on the night of the crime, and He Fei confidently responded that he was with someone named Qi Wei on the night of August 23rd. Qi Wei happened to be the financial director of Liancheng Tile Company, while He Fei was his personal driver. To verify He Fei's alibi, the Anlu police interviewed Qi Wei, and the results confirmed that Qi Wei's account matched He Fei's. Additionally, Li Dawen's wife mentioned that He Fei's father and Dawen were cousins, and the relationship between the two families had always been good. At this point, the police ruled He Fei out as a suspect. Because of this, the investigation hit a dead end. The police had investigated all of Dawen's social connections, but whether related to romantic affairs or business dealings, nearly every suspect had been inexplicably eliminated. As a result, the investigators were forced to reassess the entire case. Based on the witness Liang Jun's description, on the night of the crime, he saw two women abducting Dawen, one wearing a white dress and the other in a light gray coat with long flowing hair. From this, the police reasoned that if these two women were responsible for Dawen's murder that night, they must have used a vehicle to transport his body from the crime scene to the disposal site. Therefore, the police mapped out the main routes from the crime scene to the surrounding area. They then collected surveillance footage from cameras along these routes during the time frame of the crime. The police carefully reviewed each video. Fortunately, because the crime occurred late at night, there weren't many vehicles on the road. After multiple reviews, one car caught the police's attention. From the surveillance footage, at around 11:19 p.m. on August 23, 2014, a black car was seen moving very slowly near an intersection close to the crime scene. It circled the intersection, as if waiting for something. However, due to the heavy rain that night, the surveillance cameras could not capture the car's license plate clearly. The investigators had to rely on the surveillance footage along the route to track the movements of this vehicle. Finally, at a toll booth, a clear image of the car was captured, allowing the police to see the full details of the vehicle. It was a black Audi with a license plate beginning with 2K and ending with 030. After checking the system, the police discovered that the owner of the vehicle was Wang Baogong, a 46-year-old local resident of Anlu. The police then looked into Wang Baogong's background and found that he had been involved in several illegal activities in Anlu. With his criminal history, Wang Baogong was considered a notorious figure in the area. This was a crucial lead, but the investigators didn't act hastily. They first looked into the relationship between Wang Baogong and Dawen. Their investigation revealed that although the two had crossed paths, there were no clear conflicts or disputes between them. On September 1st, 2014, the police summoned Wang Baogong for questioning. During the interrogation, Wang Baogong revealed an unexpected piece of information. In the interrogation room, he admitted to the Anlu police that although the Audi was registered in his name, it was frequently used by his son, Wang Xiaogang. Wang Xiaogang was then summoned for questioning as well. According to Wang Xiaogang's statement, the reason he was driving around that intersection was because his girlfriend lived nearby. On the night of the crime, Wang Xiaogang had driven his girlfriend home. However, after a minor argument, they got into a fight. As a result, Wang Xiaogang drove slowly, trying to explain and resolve the issue with his girlfriend. Faced with Wang Xiaogang's somewhat hard-to-believe account, the Anlu police decided to question his girlfriend. Their stories matched perfectly. To ensure there were no mistakes, the investigators conducted a thorough search of Wang Xiaogang's Audi. After inspecting the vehicle, they found no suspicious traces or evidence linking it to the crime. Feeling frustrated, the police had no choice but to rule out any suspicion of Wang Xiaogang. The investigators then had to continue reviewing the surveillance footage. They found a total of 8 other vehicles that passed through the area before and after the crime. After carefully examining each vehicle, the police still came up with nothing. How could a vehicle leave the crime scene without leaving any trace? The investigation team decided to reconsider the details of the case. Eventually, they all agreed that searching for the perpetrator through the vehicle was the right approach. If they hadn't found any clues while reviewing the surveillance footage, they must have missed something. Therefore, the police decided to increase their manpower and conduct a more thorough examination of all the surveillance videos from nearby roads on the night of the crime. As expected, they discovered an important lead. From the crime scene to the body disposal site, investigators spotted the same three-wheeled vehicle at several intersections in the surveillance footage. What was even more peculiar was that in the back of the three-wheeled vehicle, the police noticed a person sitting there, though the image wasn't clear. Unfortunately, the surveillance footage didn't capture the person's face. To track the entire route of this three-wheeled vehicle, the investigators accessed surveillance footage from the surrounding roads in the days before and after the crime. After painstakingly reviewing the footage for a full day and night, the investigators found the three-wheeled vehicle on a road near the pedestrian area in a nearby urban district. But surprisingly, the back compartment of the vehicle had disappeared. Clearly, this was another attempt by the perpetrator to destroy evidence. At this point, the police believed that if this three-wheeled vehicle was indeed used to transport the victim, then the back compartment of the vehicle must still have some traces of the crime. Therefore, the surveillance review team continued monitoring the footage. Finally, they discovered that the back compartment had been removed on a road near the outskirts of town. Based on the location of this road, the investigation team quickly found the discarded compartment at a motorcycle repair shop. Forensic experts then discovered a small, cleaned bloodstain in one corner of the compartment. After conducting DNA analysis, the police confirmed that the blood sample belonged to the victim, Daowin. This meant that the three-wheeled vehicle was indeed used to transport the victim. Using this as a starting point, the investigation team quickly identified the owner of the three-wheeled vehicle as Xing Shui Zhao, a 28-year-old from Henan province. At this point, the police began a covert investigation into Shui Zhao's social connections. First, investigators questioned Daowin's wife, Li. According to her statement, Shui Zhao and Daowin had no connection and no conflict or disagreement between them. If Li's account was accurate, then Shui Zhao appeared to have no motive for the crime. But why was Daowin's blood found on Shui Zhao's three-wheeled vehicle? Upon further investigation, the police discovered that Shui Zhao had only recently moved to Anlu, and he was currently working at none other than Lian Kang, the company that had a business dispute with Daowin and had been investigated earlier. Even more surprising was that Shui Zhao had been introduced to the company by Hefei. Through surveillance, the police learned that Hefei and Shui Zhao had been friends since their time at martial arts school. Their relationship was very close. Although the investigation team had previously ruled out Hefei due to a lack of evidence, this connection with Shui Zhao brought Hefei back onto the list of suspects. As a result, the investigators decided to revisit Hefei's movements on the night of the crime. They discovered that Hefei's driving patterns on the night of August 23rd were highly unusual. At around 7 p.m. on August 23rd, investigators confirmed that Hefei's personal vehicle had left the Anlu city area and headed toward his hometown in Leigong. Then, at around 8:30 p.m., surveillance footage captured Hefei's vehicle returning to Anlu. Later, at approximately 3 a.m. that same night, Hefei drove back to Leigong. This strange journey was entirely different from Hefei's usual routine and didn't match the timeline he had previously provided to the police. In his earlier statement, Hefei claimed he had been with the company's financial director, Qi Wei, all night during the crime. Clearly, Hefei had lied to the police. But why did Qi Wei back up Hefei's false alibi? The investigation team found this highly suspicious, so they decided to question Qi Wei again. Qi Wei explained that on August 23rd, he had been drinking with clients in a private room for most of the evening. During that time, Hefei was free to come and go, and it wasn't until after 1 a.m. that Hefei picked him up and drove him home. In Qi Wei's memory, Hefei had been with him all night. This false testimony strongly suggested that Hefei had the opportunity to commit the crime on the night of Daowin's murder. However, the investigation team remained cautious to avoid jumping to conclusions, as they suspected that there might be additional suspects involved on the night of the crime, including the two women the witness had seen. The team speculated that beyond Hefei, Shui Zhao, and the two women, there could be others behind the scenes, orchestrating and giving orders. With this theory in mind, the police assigned 5 officers to conduct a covert and detailed investigation into the social networks of He Fei and Shui Zhao. The police examined their bank accounts but found no unusual transactions or transfers. After further investigation yielded no evidence of anyone behind the scenes, the investigation team decided to proceed with an arrest. On September 6, 2014, Anlu police arrested He Fei and Shui Zhao. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Shui Zhao confessed to the crime and implicated He Fei as the mastermind. During further interrogation, although He Fei and Shui Zhao revealed the truth about the woman in the white dress, the officers conducting the interviews were left disturbed, contemplating He Fei's true motive for the crime. Looking back to mid-July 2014, He Fei and Dawen had clashed several times over business matters related to clay. According to He Fei's confession, one of their arguments escalated into a physical confrontation involving just the two of them. At the time, Dawen had voluntarily gone to He Fei's house to negotiate a resolution, but He Fei, being hot-tempered, refused to listen. He insulted and verbally attacked Dawen. Before leaving, Dawen, in a fit of anger, made a threatening remark saying, "If you don't stop interfering, I'll kill you sooner or later." Although spoken in the heat of the moment, He Fei took this comment to heart. The more he thought about it, the more he felt uneasy. Eventually, He Fei decided that he needed to act first to protect himself. He then called his close friend and accomplice Shui Zhao to carry out the murder. To avoid police detection, He Fei and Shui Zhao carefully planned the crime for over a month. First, they bought several items for the crime, including a women's wig, a long dress, a cloak, some steel wire, and weights. Next, He Fei visited Dawen's residence multiple times to gather information. On the evening of August 23, 2014, He Fei returned to his hometown of Liu Gaohong and happened to see Dawen dining with a few friends. From this, He Fei guessed that Dawen would return home late, so he decided to carry out the crime that night. He Fei first drove back to Anlu City, then called Shui Zhao to bring the necessary tools for the crime. To avoid police surveillance, He Fei instructed Shui Zhao to use his old, 3-wheeled vehicle. Around 10:30 p.m. that evening, He Fei put on a long wig, while Shui Zhao wore a white floral dress. They quietly approached Dawen's residence. He Fei parked the 3-wheeled vehicle in a location without surveillance cameras, then hid to watch Dawen's return home. Meanwhile, Shui Zhao hid in the hallway, ready to ambush Dawen. At around 11:40 p.m., Dawen parked his car beneath his building and headed toward the staircase entrance. At that moment, Shui Zhao suddenly stepped forward and blocked his path, delivering a strong punch to Dawen's head. After being struck, Dawen immediately fought back. During the struggle, Dawen's head hit the wall, and he collapsed to the ground, silent and motionless. Immediately after, He Fei and Shui Zhao quickly loaded Dawen into the back of the 3-wheeled vehicle. He Fei claimed, "I didn't directly kill the victim, I only helped Shui Zhao dispose of the body." However, according to the forensic report, Dawen's actual cause of death was strangulation, leading to suffocation. This contradicted He Fei's account of the events. Moreover, after Dawen died, his body was intentionally dumped into the river. The steel wire and weights used had been prepared by He Fei before the crime. This clearly indicated that the murder was a premeditated act carried out by both criminals. After taking statements, the Anlu police brought He Fei and Shui Zhao to the building where Dawen lived to verify the crime scene. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Dawen's family happened to witness this. His wife, Li, was utterly shocked. She lost control and rushed to attack He Fei, but fortunately, the police intervened in time to prevent it. Li Chunping said that she could not believe that the biological son of a friend her husband had once helped would turn out to be his murderer. However, He Fei would now face the heavy consequences of his impulsive and reckless actions. On November 25, 2014, the Intermediate People's Court of Hubei Province issued its first instance verdict. The defendant, He Fei, was sentenced to death for premeditated murder, while Shui Zhao was sentenced to life imprisonment. The trial's outcome was met with overwhelming support from the public. Behind this tragic case, we once again see the complexity of human nature and the fragility of life. Hopefully, we can all take a lesson from this, to remain calm and rational in the face of conflict and disputes. And that concludes today's video. We hope it brought you some powerful emotions. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.